Hi, this video was created to explain the concept of a data flow diagram, also known as DFD. So there are two main summary definitions for DFD. So we could say that it's the logical model of a system, or we could just say it shows how data is transmitted through an information system. All right. So basically, DFD just gives the overview of an information system, how the information system works. Remember, we have different types of information system, management information system, REN web that you're used to. That is an example of an information system. So basically, DFD just shows how it works. All right, so there are four main symbols using DFD. So we have the processing symbol, which is like the god of all the symbols, and you're going to understand why I made that statement after we're further in the tutorial. So for the processing symbol, it is usually labeled with a action word. As you can see right here, the action word is calculate. And the reason for this is because a process is basically any automated action or manual activity. So because a process is an action within the information system, then it needs to start, the labeling needs to start with an action word, which is what we call a verb. And also a labeling is at the top of the symbol, and the labeling depends on the amount of processes that you have. So at different levels, you'll have different labelings. So we'll go more into that when we're looking at examples. The next symbol is the data store, and this is basically an area where you store data for future use, and it also has a labeling. And as you realize, this one is labeled D1 because it's the first data store. So if it is that you have more than one data store in your DFD, then you would have D1, D2, D3 going up to the amount of data stores that you have. And then the data store also has a name, and the name usually reflects the data that is stored inside of the database. Next symbol, we have the data flow arrow, and this basically shows the direction in which data flows throughout the information system. This also has a label because you need to know what type of data or what data is moving from one point to the next within the system. So that is what the labeling is for. And then we have our external entity. So the external entity, this can be a person, a place, a thing, in some cases, a business as well. And the external entity is usually the source or destination of information within an information system. So this means that if information is coming from a place, a thing, a person into the information system, then that's an entity. Or if information is coming from the information system and going to a person, a place, a thing, then that's also an external entity. So there are two basic rules that you must follow when designing DFD. So let me just take this opportunity to tell you that there's really no one right answer for DFD, and probably that is why it's so difficult for most persons, because you cannot pinpoint and say, yes, this is the definite right answer. It all boils down to interpretation of the information system, but once you follow the rules, you should be fine. So each level has different rules, and there's also two basic rules in general for DFD. So the first one is you cannot have an entity symbol connecting to another entity symbol. So this is our entity symbol, and if it is that you wanted to communicate with another entity, you cannot directly just attach it to another entity. You have to go through the process. Everything that you're doing, you have to go through the process symbol. And that is why I mentioned earlier that the process symbol is like the god of all symbols, because you have to go through the process, everything that you're doing. Next rule, no entity to data store. So you cannot have an entity symbol connected to a data store symbol either. And similarly, if you want to put something inside of a database, you have to go through a process. So every single symbol has to go through the process. They cannot just connect to each other. All right, so that's it for the introduction of DFD. Now we're going to look at our context level. So the context level is basically like a general overview of the information system. It is not specific, it's very general and broad. This is usually used at the management level, so they can just see an overview of the system. And there are two basic rules that you must follow for the context level DFD as well. So you must know that a context level has only one process, and that process is usually named after the name of the system itself. And also, it usually does not have a data store. So I use the term usually because there are some questions that actually ask you to use a data store at the context level. When you're going through your past paper questions, you're going to realize that as well. But most times, you don't need a data store in your context level. All right, so this is a practice question that we'll be working with. And it says a local supermarket processes customers' orders through a point of sale system. All right, so let me just put point of sale ordering system. To complete an order, customers would take their items to the cashier. So let us first try to identify the entities within this scenario. So customers, this is a person that's involved in the information processing, the information system. So first entity, customers, and they would take their items to the cashier. So next entity would be the cashier. So remember, for entity, any person, place, thing that is the source or destination for information, all right, or data. So the customer is taking their item to the cashier. The item would have the data that is required to process the order. So that is why the customer is an entity. They are the source for the data to be collected. And the data is going to the cashier. So the cashier is the destination. So that's another external entity. So we've identified two entities thus far. So the cashier then uses a point of sale. Let me put here again, ordering system, to calculate the order total. The order total is produced to the customer. Customer collects payment and produces a receipt. Cashier collects payment and produces a receipt to the customer. All right, so we've identified our two entities. So let us just see if we can identify now the process. All right, so right here it says that the process is usually the name of the system, and this scenario is all about an ordering system. So if you see right here, it says point of sale ordering system. So it's an ordering system, so we can just highlight that as our process. All right, so I already had the DFD created, so we're just going to look through it right now with some brief explanation. So we have the customer and the cashier as the entity as we have identified right here. And then let me just change this to ordering system. All right, point. So we're calling it point of sale ordering system because that's the name of the information processing system, and that's what we usually call the process in the context level. And if you realize, it is labeled by a 0 and not a 1 like what we have right here over the example of the symbols. So that is one of the major things that stands out with the context level. The process is labeled as 0 and we only have one process. All right, so let's just go through the flow of the data within the system and see if we can get some understanding here. So the customer produces their item. The customer produces items through the point of sale system, because remember, we cannot connect directly. The rule is we cannot connect directly to an entity. So you can't have entity to an entity. So it has to go through the system. So the customer sends the item through the point of sale system, the ordering system. The ordering system produces an order total to the customer. After the customer receives the order total, payment is then given to the cashier through the ordering system. And then after receiving payment, the cashier produces a receipt through the ordering system. And then the customer receives receipt for payment through the ordering system. So very simple. And then, as I said before, there's really no one right answer. It's just about following the rules. So all you have to do when you're creating your DFD, look on the scenario that you're given. First, you identify the entities. After you've identified the entities, then you identify the process. And then you just put them together while you're following these rules right here. All right. So that's it for introduction to DFD and the context level. Next video, we'll look at the level 1 DFD.